Dr. Lauren Macdonald is going to speak about personal healing experiences with psilocybin. So Dr. Lauren Macdonald is a medical doctor taking a holistic approach to health, combining integrative medicine, mind-body practices, and plant-based therapies to help maximize the body's innate healing capacity, whilst also supporting resilience and vitality. She has a background in psychology, nutrition, environmental sciences, psychiatry, yoga, and mindfulness, and she combines all of those to support the whole person healing. And she is also a stage 4 cancer survivor and an advocate for psychedelic assisted psychotherapy for end-of-life experience. And we're very happy Lauren is also one of the patient representatives in the Drug Science Medical Psychedelics Working Group. So welcome, Lauren.
Thank you so much. And just want to check, can everybody hear me okay before I carry on? Yeah, great. Wow, such amazing presentations. Thank you. I'm sure there's lots of questions for both of us and Frederic. So I will try to speak relatively quickly because I know time is pressing on. So yeah, I've been invited to join today to speak about my personal psychedelic experience with psilocybin. And I wrote an article for Drug Science back in January, which some of you may have come across. And that was really my coming out, sharing my psychedelic experience, because as a medical doctor, there's still quite a lot of stigma around it. And obviously it's illegal in the UK. So I traveled to the Netherlands to have this experience. And just to give you a bit of a backstory, why I ended up in the Netherlands in 2019, it all really came about because back in 2014, I was diagnosed with cancer. And I was diagnosed with malignant melanoma, which is one of those cancers, if it's caught early, the prognosis is relatively good. But unfortunately, for various reasons, my cancer had progressed. So by the time I was having surgery, it was already progressing in my lymph nodes. And I did actually have a period of nearly a year where I was so-called in remission. And then the cancer came back in October 2015. And the issue is that melanoma doesn't respond to chemotherapy or radiotherapy particularly well. And there was no clinical trials available for me at that time. So I was in this state of knowing I had these tumors in my lung, my adrenal gland, my chest wall. They were expanding and growing really quickly in my chest. I could visibly see them. And yet there was no treatment for me. And my oncology team just said, you know, you're going to have to hold fire. You're going to have to hang tight and see if any new trials come available in the next few months. So from October 2015 to the January was really, yeah, just kind of my darkest period. Obviously, I'd already been kind of a cancer patient for several years by that point. But I'd been practicing, you know, juicing, and I'd been looking at my diet and yoga and meditation, all of these practices. So by the time stage 4 hit, I was pretty exhausted. And I think it's really interesting what the previous speakers have been talking about trauma and dissociation, because I really feel that I did dissociate. I just felt so numb. I think I'd gone past the fight, flight kind of response, the sympathetic drive, and I was really in that freeze mode, and I was so numb and shut down. And I was waking up at 4 o'clock in the morning, looking for cancer cures and looking for other survivors of my type of cancer. But I had a prognosis at that time of about 12 months. So as you can imagine, waking up at 4 o'clock in the morning when the house is quiet and it's dark, it's really terrifying to be in that place. Yeah, as a medical doctor, I am obviously familiar with dying and death. I've seen patients as they're dying, and I've pronounced people dead, and yet when it's happening to you, you just cannot believe it. And there was definitely a sense of dissociation, and I really do think that cancer is a trauma for a lot of people, and it's not really talked about or discussed in that way, and you certainly don't get the emotional support quite often that you need. So I was in that place for about 3 months, really experiencing firsthand what I would call existential crisis, existential distress. And it has got a different flavor to anxiety and depression, I think. There's something so enormous about it, and you just can't get your head around it. And then you're trying to face the fact that you're going to die. I was so scared of dying that I was looking up Dignitas, and I was thinking about other ways, you know, not thinking I was going to take my own life, but I was going to potentially try and make it easier for me to die. So it was really, death was really, really near to me at that point. And fortunately, by an absolute miracle, I was able to get onto a trial a few months later. And again, absolute miraculous response to treatment, because I had about a 25% chance of responding to immunotherapy. And I did respond, and within 6 months, I had what's called no evidence of disease, which is so wonderful. And as a stage 4 cancer patient, that's all you could really hope for. And yet I was pretty broken by the past 3 years. I was struggling. I think on the surface, I probably looked like I was doing well. I definitely think one of my coping mechanisms in the past was to suppress my emotions. And so I carried on, but I did feel in survival mode. And I tried to put my life together, tried to get back on track. And then, people say you never get hit by lightning twice. But just as I felt like I was turning a corner, I was actually hit by a van as a pedestrian. And I sustained a horrific broken leg and spent about 5 months in a wheelchair. And again, just felt like I had plunged back, when I still wasn't really out of that survival mode. I then had an experience of, again, trauma, but this time it was the hypervigilance. I was having flashbacks from the van hitting me, the moment the van hit me. And finally, at that point, I did seek psychology. And I ended up having some sessions. I even had EMDR, which was really helpful. And yet I still didn't feel that, I still felt a bit stuck. And again, I think probably from the outside, I looked okay. And yet inside, I just didn't feel like myself. I didn't feel connected to myself. I definitely lost kind of my sparkle, the essence of myself that I knew I had before I had cancer and before the car accident. So luckily, I came across an amazing TED talk by Roland Griffiths talking about the research looking at psilocybin for end-of-life anxiety. And then I went down a rabbit hole and looked at the research for PTSD and just thought, although I maybe don't have either of those at the moment, there was a lingering sense of, my body has been through a lot of trauma, and probably holding on to something here is probably something unprocessed in me. And just knowing that with the mind-body connection, I wanted to do anything I could to also make sure the cancer wasn't going to come back. So I wanted to process my emotions. I wanted to process any trauma. So I signed up for a retreat in the Netherlands in 2019 and had an incredible experience at the retreat. And I'm going to try and explain to you in words a little bit about my journey with psilocybin there. And it's really hard to do, as anyone who's tried to explain a psychedelic journey to someone else, it never comes out exactly how you want it to. But there were definitely some big insights and takeaways that I got from the journey. And this was a journey that involved blindfold on, high dose psilocybin, truffles, and beautiful music in a ceremonial setting. And I think the biggest takeaway for me was having the experience of not being in my body, being in another realm, dimension, something beyond, and being in an energetic form. So I was no longer of my body. I was just an energetic essence, a swirling energy. And in that space, I kind of met and communicated and connected with quite a lot of the cancer patients that I've met over the years on the ward, on the chemo unit, who died. And I had this beautiful experience of them being able to communicate to me and just share with me that this is not the end. When you die, you do leave your physical form, but it very much carries on. We're still here. And yeah, the message was just like, it's all good, don't worry, like we're here, and it's not as scary as you think. So to have that, I didn't even go, I don't think my intention for the retreat was even to necessarily process or consider my fear of dying. I think I didn't even know that I was still that scared of it, but that was what came up for me. That was a big part of the journey. And another, it's one of these things that I could talk about endlessly, and there were so many chapters to it, but it was lovely to go through all the stages of my life and just kind of let go of a lot. And there was lots of crying. At one point my eye mask was absolutely saturated, and again, I think that was really good for me, because I've traditionally, prior to the experience, I think I was quite stoical, and I did kind of suppress my emotions probably, and that was the way I got through what was an incredibly tough few years. And yet it was so healing to just cry and let it all out. And there were some other beautiful experiences that happened within the journey, things like a deep understanding that I could send people love directly from my heart in energetic form, just by thinking of them, and I didn't need to necessarily tell them, but you know, that we can just share love in that way, which I thought was so beautiful. And another aspect was, at one point I was in my own heart, and I connected with wolves that were in my heart that I found out were my ancestors, all on the maternal line, all my grandmas and all of the women that had lived before me. And there's just this deep knowing that whenever I speak, whenever I talk, I'm actually, it's all of their wisdom as well. It's like all of our combined experiences and wisdom. And even just now thinking, oh no, I've got to speak to all of these people, I actually just tuned into that before I started speaking and thought, you know what, this isn't just me, this is my lineage, this is all of the women that have gone before me, and I can just trust that when I speak, I'm speaking my truth and connect to them. So that's just something that stayed with me. But yeah, I think the biggest takeaway for me from the retreat, from my journey, was this knowing that it's death is not final, and that actually yes, our physical form ends, but it's not as final as I thought. Because when I was, you know, at the very beginning, a few years prior, when I was waking up at 4 o'clock in the morning and was so petrified and so terrified, I felt so alone. Even though I had friends and family that were, you know, supporting me there during the day, the waking hours, at 4 o'clock in the morning, I felt just like I was on this solo journey towards my death, and it was going to be very final. And I just wish that I could have had the experience sooner, because I went through so much suffering in those early hours of the morning. And it was all about the finality of it and feeling so alone. And yet now I don't have any of that. I think, you know, I'm so fortunate. I've been in remission now for nearly 5 years, and I actually have scans tomorrow, so I still have scans every 6 months just to check I'm still in remission. And of course there's the gift of time, which makes things easier as well, but there's definitely something in just carrying the knowledge that I got from that experience, that even if cancer should come back, it's okay, it's going to be okay, whatever the outcome is. And that's not to say I wouldn't be devastated if the cancer came back, and I, you know, obviously I grieve for my life, and I'm sure I'd feel depressed, but I don't think I would have that existential crisis that I went through, because I've got peace with it, and that's all just come about through that experience. So yeah, for me it definitely has been life-changing, and I'm now just on a mission to help other cancer patients get access to this medicine, because as I said, I'm obviously could potentially be called a cancer survivor, although as a stage 4 patient I'll probably always just be classed as a stage 4 cancer patient. But I'm very aware that there's a patient group like me who could do with this medicine, this experience, to help them get back to life, to help them kind of process all the trauma they went through, and really re-engage with life, connect back to themselves as well. And then there's obviously the cancer patients with active tumours who are terrified, the person I was at 29 years old. And I just think to be able to give that to them as a part of a holistic toolbox, not saying that's going to be the only thing that they need, but it just should be on offer, I think, through the NHS, as part of this toolbox for cancer patients. I'd love to see at some point when I go for my follow-up scans, a beautiful room, ceremonial room dedicated to that aspect of healing, because as well, we just know that, well, I think, and it's really interesting to see the research that happens looking at psychedelics on the physical body moving forward. But for me, I know that being able to surrender and let go of that kind of white knuckling terror, that the state that I was in for so long, I'm sure that had such an impact on my physiology. And as we know, the more we can kind of shift into parasympathetic healing state, the more that our immune system can do what it's meant to do. Obviously, sleeping is a huge thing as well. So not waking up at 4 o'clock in the morning and being on Google searching for cures for hours is definitely not good for your immune system. So again, I just think that it should be part of the toolbox in helping cancer patients, but obviously helping so many more people as well.